tell us a little bit about Justice League War. I wasn't really familiar. Well, I was familiar with like Trinity War and things like that, but like, so where does this take place in the DC universe?
Okay, so Justice League War is actually kind of a loose adaptation of the Jeff Johns, Jim Lee comic book of I think issues 1 to 6 of the New 52. Mm-hmm. So we kind of loosely based upon the events in that book. We didn't adhere to it like I usually did with like the Dark Knight Returns, but that is what we ended up doing with the translation, was translating that first graphic novel. And so this is our first like true New 52 DCU that we've done. Flashpoint was kind of still the old, and then at the end of Flashpoint we kind of hinted at war in the New 52 universe.
Oh, I see. So basically Flashpoint was like the prologue set of
kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that somewhere down the line we can do some other films that will hopefully connect the events from Flashpoint into Justice League War and any other films we do in the New 52 universe, which would be pretty cool, but I don't know, we haven't done that yet, but I'm hoping that we'll do that eventually. So I'm trying to put in little Easter eggs all throughout all the films that, like, if you watch carefully, you'll see it there. So, yeah.
So that kind of goes into a question that I had. So you said that you took this as a looser adaptation. Mm-hmm. In that case, did that make it easier then to compress the first kind of Justice League arc after the New 52 into a 2-hour movie?
Whenever you do an adaptation, it's never easy. Like sometimes if you're doing too close to the source material, then you feel like you're kind of stifled. But sometimes in this case, where the material that was there wasn't as deep as like the Dark Knight Returns, where it was 4 graphic novels trying to fit into 2 70-minute pieces. With this one, because it was just 6 issues and it's really just one long fight versus Darkseid, it kind of gave us a little bit more kind of flexibility in how to interpret it. That now on the other hand though, one of the challenges was to try to create set pieces. Like whenever I do my films, I think of it like Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's always like the rolling ball sequence. There's the fight with the Nazis. There's the ending with the arc. So whenever I do my films, I always try to figure out what would be a good set piece, because you want to keep the momentum going. So in the comic books, there were certain set pieces, but how does that translate into the pace of a film? So I had to figure out, okay, this is a pretty good set piece. Let's elaborate. Or this particular sequence maybe went on a little too long in the comic, but maybe we can scale back a little bit, or kind of elaborate on things that maybe the comic kind of just glossed over.
I think seeing more of Darkseid on this one will be very interesting to see.
Oh yeah.
That's something I did read the first 6 comics of it, and it's a very nice piece. But so I'm assuming that this is going to kind of show more in depth of the battle between Darkseid and the New Justice League. Right?
Oh yeah. One of the things that for myself, I'm a huge fan of the DC properties. So whenever Darkseid shows up, you gotta bring it. When it comes to the fight choreography and the action. So of course, I rewatched all of the Superman adventures that Darkseid showed up, the Justice League, and all the past. I worked on the Superman, Batman, Apocalypse, the Darkseid, during that stuff. So I looked at that fight sequence, and then I looked at everything that's been done in the past, and then I asked myself, okay, how do I push it forward? Because I don't want to do the same thing. It's always Omega beams and explosions and stuff. So I tried to keep true to what Darkseid was that it was this larger than life character, and I wanted to make it seem like the Justice League had to band together to defeat Darkseid, because by themselves they couldn't do it, but as a team they can. And so I wanted to try to push the fight choreography and the action so that Darkseid felt like kind of very larger than life and a huge threat that needed all these heroes to defeat him.
Well, in the comics, it's pretty new how they got together. It's a new universe, new version of the New 52. So they don't all necessarily get along. They don't necessarily know each other very well. And often in the animated, they're suddenly like really close really fast again. Are you going to follow the comics more where they're still having difficulties learning each other?
Yeah, one of the things that you'll notice with this, as opposed to what Bruce Timm had done in Justice League and then Unlimited and everything, is that this is their first meeting. So all these characters have never met before. They're all brand new. So a lot of times their personalities will clash, which is actually good and bad. Sometimes you'll see characters who will get along right away, and other ones they'll have conflict. And of course, whenever Superman and Batman meet, there's always conflict in there. So it's kind of interesting that our takes on the New 52 characters is going to be very different. Superman's very different than what we've done in the past. So it took me a while to kind of get my mind wrapped around how this Superman is very different than what we normally know as Superman. So that's one of the things that's kind of different. Batman's pretty much the same though. You can only play a Batman. Like there's no jokes coming from Batman, which is good. I mean, there's no no change in his character. He's pretty much a straight man, but everybody else has a very unique how the characters are. Like Wonder Woman's very different too.
If somebody hasn't necessarily engaged with the comics, but maybe knows the universe through movies and television, will they still find Justice League more accessible?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, because the way we introduce the characters, we introduce them in such a way that even if you don't know anything about the characters, you'll understand what the character archetype is. It's like when Wonder Woman shows up, you know that she's the warrior. You know, when Superman shows up, he's the protector of Metropolis. You know, there's certain things that new fans will be able to get right into it, even if they know nothing about the characters. Because like Cyborg's very new, and if you read the comic, it's actually an origin story for Cyborg. So in the movie, you'll actually see that, and you'll understand how he became the character he was, and how he became the hero that ended up joining the Justice League. So it's going to be good.
You mentioned Easter eggs. You're playing in eggs. You want to work with the other characters in the movies. Obviously, you probably already know what next year movie I'm working on, but can you mention anything you're working on? What characters you're going to take in the next movie?
I know what we're planning on doing is, I think the next film after this is Son of Batman is what we've announced. So we try to carry over, like I think the art direction is going to be the same, because I think Son of Batman takes place in the New 52 universe loosely. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to connect a lot of these films kind of artistically, and sometimes if we can, we bring back the same voice actors. It depends on their schedule, of course. But so we're trying to tie them all together. So if you actually watch it, there is some kind of continuity running all through them. Not so much as maybe like the Marvel films, the live action films, but there is something there. And we always try to, at the end of these films, we're trying to do maybe there might be a tag that might hint at the next film or what might happen in the future. So it's just good. Yeah. It's always exciting.
What's your favorite which is the one that you would relate to out of the 5 that are in this story? Which is the one that you're like, you know what, that's a little bit of me inside this one?
Oh geez, let me think. Probably maybe Cyborg, just because when he gets the armor on him and everything, he doesn't know what the hell's going on, and as time goes on, he finds his place on the team, and he's an integral part of the story. But I think that's who I'd relate to, just because a lot of these films I'll get big name story or something, and I'll be like, okay, how do I translate this? Jim Lee's I'm a huge fan of Jim Lee stuff, and the fact that I had to translate his stuff would be, to me, it was a little nerve-wracking. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this because if I can't look Jim in the eye if he hates my film, or same with Frank Miller, if Frank hates my stuff, there's not so much I could do. So that to me is really what I would probably relate to is Cyborg, just the fact that he's in this kind of pantheon of iconic heroes, and he's got to find a place and kind of stand out among them.
Cyborg kind of learned that pretty fast, though. He's the architect of all the Justice League, pretty much. So.
Pretty much, yeah.
Did you have any interaction with Jim Lee or Jeff Johns in terms of adapting the story?
I actually was able to meet Jim and Jeff, but the nice thing about those guys is that they never really tell me this is exactly what we want. They know that we will take artistic license and kind of make it our own. But I think they've seen it and they've dug it. So it's funny because I think Jim had mentioned there was a few scenes in the film where he's like, oh, I wish I had done that in the comic, and because then it's when you're doing it, you're trying your best to try to translate what you're trying to do. But then when you look at it back, in hindsight, he's like, oh, it would have been better if we had done this, and especially when I did that,